Stay tuned and let's take a look at this Marvel Legends X-Men retro carded Apocalypse. Pow, and welcome back to the channel, Dan Who Reviews. As always, my name is Dan W. Make sure you are following me on Instagram at It's Dan Who. And remember, you can now hit that join button and become a channel member as well. Either show some love or join the members club. Much appreciated. Today we are taking a look at this Marvel Legends X-Men retro carded Apocalypse, who is on this glorious, oversized, super nostalgic throwback packaging, which is of course a tribute to that 90s Toy Biz line of X-Men figures that was released to accompany the animated series at the time. Now of course Apocalypse was in that line of figures, but the Apocalypse we got there was blue. This Apocalypse that Hasbro gave us today is actually more accurate to his animated appearance with the purples and blues, which makes this release pretty confusing as we already have a line of VHS X-Men characters with cel shading which are meant to be accurate to the animated show. Yet this figure has no cel shading and it is clearly not in a VHS box. So is it meant to be a animated style figure or is it meant to be a comic figure? You're gonna have to ask Hasbro or make up your own mind. But I am happy to report the card back is actually purple. Some of the promo images made it look a little bit red with an orange tint, but it is the accurate purple color to match the villain style X-Men characters. The only other villain we have is Silver Samurai. Hopefully we get some more X-Men retro cards before the year is out, because there's still some pretty A-list characters we need in their Jim Lee uniforms to match the other figures in the collection, but we shall see at PulseCon, fingers crossed. But here we have Apocalypse with his two heads. He has an interchangeable weapon and interchangeable hands, which is nice to see on the retro card. Some accessories, which isn't always the case. We get an image of Apocalypse here, Ancient Evil, Marvel's Apocalypse. Spin it around onto the back, you get that throwback stencil which was on the Toy Biz cards, a digital render, as well as a write-up that reads, "Look upon the future and tremble. He is Apocalypse, the world's most powerful mutant, and from the ashes of our world, he will build a better one." So let me spin him back round. And before we actually open this guy up, I do want to do a straight up side by side with Rhino. As you can see, that oversized Spider-Man card is the exact same size as this one. And then here we have Apocalypse next to a regular sized retro card. It's Rogue. And maybe we'll see Rogue again later in this review. We shall see. But anyway, let's waste no further and get him open. Here we have Apocalypse out of the packaging with all of his accessories, and I am happy to see some accessories with this figure because that's not always the case on a retro card, and the prices ain't exactly getting cheaper. You know, I always like options for display, so of course we're going to look at all of this, but first impressions, I do really like the colour palette here. It definitely gives me those nostalgic vibes of the animated show. However, his look is not complete without the pipe, so let's put those pipes in first. If you spin around on the back, you can see two holes on the bout and two holes on the sort of forearm. And then you get these pipes, which is the only bit of grey on an otherwise purple and blue body, and these all should plug in no problems at all. So I'm doing this with you guys on camera so you can see. I'm putting the actual bendy bit on the bout. I think that's the way it's meant to go. So there's that, and then you plug that in there, and then that should complete the look for Apocalypse. That one's a bit, there you go, it's in. So there you go, plugged in around the back, spin it round, and they should move and articulate with the arms. Yes, they do. There he is. That the look is complete. All hail Señor. Now this Apocalypse is inspired by the 90s animated X-Men show that is also nostalgic to us, both in design with the big A on the bout and with the colour palette with the purples and the blues. He is definitely my mind's eye of animated Apocalypse. Now, I'd be lying to you if I've said I've read every comic of the X-Men, so he may appear like this at some point during the comics, but my mind will always be drawn to that animated appearance. So I think if Hasbro made this consciously to look like the animated show, then why doesn't he have cel shading to match the other VHS figures which are to represent the animated show? It is a very confusing release, and it is the only time where I feel that cel shading would benefit this figure, because I obviously want to display him with my VHS style X-Men. So very confused. I do think this figure is missing a bit of shading on the body, otherwise it's very flat blue and purples. There is some nice dark wash though on the face to bring out the details, and I do like this figure, but I'm confused. Why doesn't it have cel shading? Now, there may not be any cel shading, but there is a nice dark wash over this face here to bring out the nice creases and the sculpt of this grimacing Apocalypse head sculpt. I like that you can see the teeth. You can even see the colour of the gums in the teeth. You can see the red eyes with a dash of yellow in there for the pupil. And it is a head sculpt we've seen before with a little modification. But overall, it is a very nice Apocalypse head sculpt with a nice bit of detail. If only that same shading detail was on the rest of the figure, it would have really brought out some of the other sculpt. But we do have options. The second head sculpt is a more neutral, sort of grumpy expression for Apocalypse. As you can see, the blue piping from his ears going along the mouth. He's still got the red eyes with a dash of yellow, and again, it has some nice shading in the creases to bring out the sculpt. And again, I like options here, so bringing both head sculpts back in, it is completely up to you how you will display your animated style Apocalypse, grimacing or neutral. And I'm sure if you have other Apocalypse figures, you could try swapping on the heads, but saying that, these are the two expressions we already have. The heads are on the standard sort of ball and hinge, so we can have a little bit of rotation in there. But unlike the Build-A-Figure piece, the collar on this Apocalypse is actually a molded piece to the torso area, which is nice. The shoulder pads are also a part of this upper torso area, all in the blue. But it doesn't hinder the arms. The arms will still go up. There is no butterfly or anything like that, though. You can't lift those arms too high, otherwise the piping will pop out as well. But I do like this redesigned sort of chest area. And even the bout is a different piece now, where the A is much more accurate to how we've seen it in the animated show, nice and clear. I do have a little bit of sloppiness to my paint though. You can see some of the blue bleeding on to the purple bout, so maybe I need to sort that out. But as we're closer in here, you can see there's a little bit of sculpted detail on the collar, but other than that, it's quite a flat design. Now, that is credit to the animated show, to be fair, so it's not like they're missing any detail here. Apocalypse himself is a bit of reuse, so you've still got some of the sculpted elements and musculature, but again, there's no cel shading here, and there is some natural shadows depending on how the light hits him, but there is no actual sort of dry brushing or sort of a wash on this figure to bring out those said details. There's a little bit of sculpting there on the chest as well. Moving down to the legs, again, same, nice sculpted, but all in a blue plastic. You've still got the pins in the knees and in the arms, but obviously it's hidden there by the forearm sort of strap. The hands are the same that we've seen before, but again, this is accurate to his look in the animated show, so I'm not complaining about it at all. He comes with two open palm hands out of the box for grabbing your X-Men, but we also get a set of fisted hands, so we can of course still punch some of the X-Men. But that is not all. We also get this hand cannon accessory. Now, we all know Apocalypse in the comics has advanced futuristic tech and weaponry, but this particular look and colour is taken directly from the animated show, and I will show you that in a second. But to attach this, you will need to get Apocalypse. You will need to take off a hand, unplug the pipe, take off the gauntlet on the wrist, and then you can put on the weapon because it's hollow. Make sure the fin is facing down, and you plug that onto the hand like you would any normal hand, and you can feel it pop on there. Then there's a little hole for the pipe to go back into, like so, and then there you go. Now you've got Apocalypse with a cannon, and we actually have some power effects too. So we get 3 effect pieces that plug into this cannon. Now, they look recognizable because this is basically an oversized red repulsor blast that we have seen many times before in Marvel Legends. It is just scaled up, of course. That can plug into either hole on the front of the cannon. And there is also 2 little red muzzle flashes that plug in to either side of the cannon as well. I think we've seen these exact red ones with the inner demons recently as well. But you don't have to use them at all if you don't want to, but they do bring a little bit of life. Let me take them off and let me just zoom out to show you here that Hasbro have clearly used an animation cell from the animated show to be inspired to make this accessory here, as if I bring in a nice side by side, you can see exactly where Hasbro got their reference. This animation style, it seems, even down to the colours on the weapon. They are missing a little bit of blue in the barrel and on the sort of top, but overall, I don't think they've done a bad job at capturing that there. It's pretty good, it works for me. Okay, so let's look at some comparisons. First things first, let me get the tape measure out and show you. He is just about 8 inches tall, which would make him sort of on scale with the previous Apocalypse. So if I bring the Build-A-Figure in, this is what we initially thought it was a repaint of, but nope, there is some new elements to this new one. As I've already mentioned, shoulders are different, the collar piece is different, the sort of chest area, the bout, the legs to the sort of body are the same, but even the wrist sort of gauntlet pieces are different. So let's throw them on the spinny round table so you can see for yourself all the way around. Of course, the colours are drastically different. One represents the comics, one represents his appearance from the animated show. So I'm going to be putting him with my VHS figures, even if he doesn't have cel shading, because that just seems like the most obvious place to put him. But as you can see, the wrist gauntlets are newly sculpted pieces, the shoulder pads are different, the collar is now glued onto that new sort of chest overlay, but it is on the same old base body, and the heads are very similar, but there is a slight difference in that stripe going down the forehead. I should have probably put on the same head sculpt for this comparison, but you can see for yourself, they are very similar, but each to their own. Here we have our Marvel Legends Apocalypse comparison, as I've brought in the Age of Apocalypse. So both with the retro and the Build-A-Figure, here are all 3 of the Apocalypse figures we have been given by Hasbro. The one in the middle with the Build-A-Figure and the other 2 were packed on their own. Now, as you can see, it's clearly Apocalypse. Doesn't matter which style it is in, and they are all built on the same base body. But you can justify each one of these being in your collection. At first, I was trying to be one of those collectors where I only needed one character represented in plastic on my shelf, but that rule slowly goes out the window when there's just so many cool character designs, and all 3 of these justifiably can fit in a collection. You can put the retro one with your VHS X-Men to represent the X-Men animated show. The one in the middle is your 616 main Apocalypse for the display, and then of course, if you like AOA, you've got the Age of Apocalypse, because you can't have an AOA display without Apocalypse. But you let me know which is your favourite version in the comments below. This is what I was most interested in seeing. How does this Apocalypse compare with some of the VHS X-Men? So first up, I've got a few of the villains that we've got so far. I guess you can count this version of Morph as a villain with Mr. Sinister. Now we do know Mystique is up for pre-order and we should probably get her before the end of the year, but you cannot deny that these look really nice together and definitely give you those animated feels. So yeah, this Apocalypse is definitely going to fit in nicely with these. Here we have some of the other VHS X-Men figures that we have gotten so far, with Jubilee, Wolverine, Jean Grey and Storm. And again, he fits in. And here we have a quick group shot of all of the VHS X-Men style figures with this retro Apocalypse. And yet again, he fits seamlessly in with this collection. So again, I asked the question to Hasbro, why didn't you give him cel shading? Now, I cannot confirm or deny that this style and colour of Apocalypse ever appeared on a comic page, but here we have 2 comic X-Men with Wolverine and Cyclops to show you that Apocalypse will of course still stand in a comic display, no problems at all, as the character design is still undoubtedly Apocalypse. I also think the community would kill me if I didn't do a comparison compared to Rogue. So here we have Apocalypse compared to retro carded Rogue. Okay, I'll give you what you want. There you go, you filthy perverts. That's what you wanted. Here we have Apocalypse compared to Frogman, Tigra and White Rabbit. And last but absolutely never least, here we have Apocalypse compared to Captain Britain and Hal, Fire, Hank. Final thoughts on this Marvel Legends X-Men retro carded Apocalypse. Now this is undeniably a representation of Apocalypse, how he appeared in that 90s X-Men animated show. Now, maybe he couldn't fit into a VHS box, so they decided they wanted to release him, so they put him on a retro card anyway. But even then, it makes me scratch my head to why we didn't get cel shading on this figure. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of cel shading. However, I've committed to that VHS X-Men line now, so if a figure is meant to represent that version of the X-Men, then I feel it needs the cel shading. So that's a small gripe from me. Otherwise, this is a solid Apocalypse figure that's on an older base body with some nice tweaks to make it more accurate to what it's meant to represent. And the extra gun is a nice touch as well for display purposes. You know I always appreciate options, but I want you guys to tell me, where is this guy going to end up in your display? Are you a little bit confused like me? Is he a VHS meant to be, or is he just going to go onto your comic display? Always curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. But if you like Marvel Legends, and guess what? You're in the right place. Check out the videos tab, find the playlists, but most importantly, please, 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 hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, don't miss out on a video, and please, hit that join button, become a channel member, either show some love or join the members club. Much, much appreciated. You can follow me on Instagram at itsdanwho. And I'm on Twitter as well, at DanWhoReviews. Tweet me, don't be shy, and I would, of course, see you on the next one.